Hello and welcome to 20 Lore Pro. Today we are doing a set review of Into the Inklands, which releases in hobby stores on February 23rd and full release on March 8th. Today I'm joined here with RMB, Jebas, and Wonderland. Thank you all so much for joining today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderland, how have you been doing with Lorcana? Have you had any major finishes, either in tournaments or any of the 1Ks that have been offered?
I finished with a 5-3 record. I think I got like 14th or 15th place. I was the lowest on the tie breaks. Got top 4 at a win a box locally, like 40 people, nothing too big. I've been doing a lot more commentary for the bigger events. It's pretty fun to do. I stream most of them on my channel, Wonderland Streams, Twitch, like Twitch TV/Wonderland Streams with 2 Vs.
That's great. I'll be sure to link that and the others as well in the description below for everyone to look at later on. Jebas, how has your Lorcana play been this past season?
It was alright for me. There were some bigger Pixelborn tournaments, some run by the pack, and some just on the Lorcana Play Network, and I top 8'd a couple of those. There was like a 2K not too far away that I top 8'd as well, so not too bad.
Being able to go to a 2K and do well must feel pretty good.
Yeah, it was nice. I got to meet a bunch of the 20 Lore Pro guys as well.
Well, RMB, how did you do this past season?
I probably grinded more than most. I played in a total of 6 1Ks or more. I played in a 2K, a 1.4K, a 1.5K, and then a handful of 1Ks. I top 8'd every single one of them. My highest placement was 2nd. I took 3rd once, and then 4 or 5 top 8s where I just didn't get there in top cut. Had, you know, pretty bad matchups, a little bit of variance. You'll always catch me grinding paper.
Those are some pretty impressive finishes for set 2. What deck really helped you get ahead that you felt you had the most practice with and then you were able to perform the most with?
I think anyone that ever seen the initials RMB is just going to automatically assume that I'm on blue steel, and about 100% of the time they're going to be correct. I don't think I brought anything other than blue steel to events this season.
Wow, blue steel, we did a deck tech together over that deck, one of the lists at least that you had for that, and it seemed like a very powerful deck at the time, but one that required a lot of practice and understanding the lines.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't get to pull off any top finishes with it, but there were definitely some individuals that were able to kind of make some minor tweaks on the shell that I initiated. Just being able to develop and design something that brought something that wasn't Ruby Amethyst to the environment, that was the biggest thing that made me happy. Whether or not, you know, I got a first place finish with it didn't necessarily matter, as long as other people were also getting, you know, top finishes. It made me feel like my job as a deck designer was complete.
Well, Jebas, for season 2, what was your primary go-to deck and the playstyle that you like to do?
Well, my go-to deck started out as sort of the popsicle blue-red before eventually moving over into the Amethyst Ruby, mostly because the popsicle deck super struggled into Amethyst Ruby. So I generally tend to lean towards something that's a little bit more controlling, a little bit more opportunity to draw a lot of cards. Because I feel like in especially a longer event, it gives you more opportunities to make favorable decisions through the course of a game. A lot of Ruby, I would say.
Ruby and Amethyst just seeing probably the most play from set 2 that many will agree that tended to be the top finishers in most tournaments. Whether or not those cards were favored or made people feel happy when they played them, that's can be debated.
Yeah, I would say that overall it was probably the best deck, but I think it was the best deck because it just didn't have a ton of really bad matchups to be in. It was really hard to combat the deck directly without absolutely sacrificing most of your other matchups. So it was just a pretty consistent deck, so good players over, you know, longer tournaments, you know, felt that they had the ability to sort of control their outcome a little bit better. So then you'd see it show up in a much higher percentage than other decks, and then that's why you're just seeing it in the top 8s a lot as well.
Wonderland, what deck did you play during set 2?
Well, I like to meta jump. Mostly I don't like to lose, and after playing against the aforementioned blue red fishbone quill deck, I stopped playing Amber Steel quite quickly because it was a nightmare matchup where they literally have the best cards against you, being like Fishbone Quill and Be Prepared, and they're able to play it a few turns earlier. So I switched off of that to a few different things. I played Red Purple for a little bit, actually, just as well, because I wanted to beat that deck. And then as more of the meta shifted to Red Purple, I started playing decks that were geared to beat Red Purple. So then I played a lot of Ember Steel discard, and then I played Blue Steel for a little bit before Red Purple shifted to beat Blue Steel, and then Blue Steel had to shift again to beat Red Purple. And I think currently at the end of the meta, Blue Steel's actually slightly advantaged against Red Purple if the builds line up correctly. And but towards that time, I ended up playing the Tiana lists because Blue Steel like started dominating Red Purple, and like at this top level of Pixelborn, like when you're in the top 100 players, you're playing against like the same people a lot, and so like the meta shifts very quickly because people counterpick. And it's like Bjorn and I wanted to beat Blue Steel in like the local Manticore event. So we just like brewed with some lists that we got from Boomy and expanded from that. And then, you know, Tiana blew up a little bit with maybe false promises of beating Red Purple, but like it had a good Red Purple matchup. But eventually the Red Purple players knew how to play against it, and some things shifted. I saw Dragonfires, you know, come in. But towards the end of the season, I actually went back to just Old Faithful Amber Steel.
That's something at the end of the meta, like you were saying, where we just saw this rise of Tiana decks, and it's kind of scary because that card can be very powerful when the right cards are in line to help it, and you really just take away games.
Yeah, it got to the point at the end of the meta that I would have much rather had sat across from a Ruby Amethyst player than a Tiana player. If I didn't have a 2-drop, it was absolutely game over, and then they just hid it behind bodyguards and eventually played Tiana. And half the deck is actions. Like, you know, we're playing a whole new world and grab your swords and let it go. Like, I tried to play the full 4 of Hades, but sometimes like you just you just die before you get to play the Hades.
Yeah, both very impressive decks, and when piloted right with the right draws, it can be really scary. Looking at set 3, there's so many great cards in Into the Inklands. Lots of new mechanics, new card types even. Wonderland, could you give us a quick broad overview into your opinion into the Inklands?
Loved it so far. I was a little worried about locations, but after playing a few games with them, like they can be really powerful, but they're not overpowered. They're not worthless. Like they impact the game to an extent. It's going to add an extra layer to deck building. I've been pretty happy with that. And there's just like the addition of Bare Necessities and Ursula seem to also help combat some of the current archetypes and maybe give us more than 1 or 2 decks we can play. I like interaction, and anything to create more interaction, I'm all for.
Jebas, overall, which color out of all of them do you think had the strongest cards for set 3?
I would say probably green got the most individual like boost for playability between how rough it was in sets 1 and 2 into set 3. I think it got a lot of cards that really will allow it to shine as more than just like a raw support color only. So I would say it's probably green.
Green also featuring one of my favorite characters from Treasure Planet, the little morph card, which can really transform, shift into any character. So exciting to see how that relates into gameplay and how decks are built around him.
Yeah, I think there'll certainly be a shift deck that focuses pretty heavily on that. I mean, playing Morph into, you know, something like the Sad Beast all of a sudden on 3 is going to be incredibly powerful and hard to deal with, because now you don't have to jump through a lot of hoops. You just play this, play that, and it's pretty straightforward. And then also something like the 3-cost Ursula, just being able to double sing or double cast one of your songs once it's sung, very, very strong. And there are a lot of card combinations with it that are going to, throughout this set, be very strong, but as we get more songs in future sets as well, will just continue to be strong. I think that'll be a role player in green for quite a while.
RMB, what would you say is the strongest color set from set 3?
Jebas is right. Green got a lot of tools. Green got a lot of tools. I think that it's probably, in my opinion, tied with Amber. I think there's some things in Amber that are flying under the radar. Obviously, Bare Necessities is an absolutely absurd card. I think it's probably, in my opinion, the best card of set 3. I might be a little bit biased. I came from Magic. I was a mono black player in Magic. My most cast card of all time in Magic was Thoughtseize, so I want to look at my opponent's hand. I want to take their, most powerful non-character card out of their hand and say, you don't get to play with this. I think that card's absolutely insane. It got another card in Pluto, the 1-drop. So I know that there's been a lot of conversation around play draw dependency in this game, and how do we try to combat play draw dependency and give the person on the draw more tools to have that catch-up mechanic. And I think Pluto both helps and hurts that front, which it's kind of sad. But if you're on the draw and you go Pluto on one and your opponent didn't really do anything on one, like, you're already caught up. Being first to play a 3-drop on 2 is incredibly powerful. I also think that it's going to hurt that play draw dependency just a little bit more. Not only am I on the play, but I'm also going to get to play a 3-drop. If you don't do anything on turn 1, my 3-drop could be an Ursula, as they've mentioned. That's going to now sing a Bare Necessities. Now I get to take 2 cards out of your hand. I think the color combination of yellow and green definitely benefited the most from set 3, and I'm terrified. My fishbone quills are no longer safe. My Holy Worlds are no longer safe.
I think that we'll definitely see some decks that utilize Pluto to try to rush out cards, like you're saying, that can really just steamroll some games and take away some early wins. Wonderland, what would you say is the most powerful color from set 3?
Well, they had already said the other two, but I think steel is also pretty well off here. It gets some solid removal. It gets some very powerful shift cards in Robin Hood. You also get the new Bayou Combo with the Sheriff. So it has cards that go into a few different archetypes, whereas in the Pluto and the Bare Necessities are going to see play and a lot of it, and are very good. And then Ursula is the Ursulas are going to push green for being better as well. I think steel just gets more overall good cards, just kind of sprinkled around. And so the best cards might be in another color, but the power level of most of the steel cards I think are better in general.
Going into set 3, talking about the strongest colors, we also have a new card type called locations. RMB, could you give us a walkthrough of what locations are, how they work, and what your favorite location is?
Yeah, so initially I had kind of written locations off. I thought that they were not going to be impactful in any way, shape, or form, and after I've started playing with some of them, boy, was I wrong. I was so incredibly wrong. Locations are a new type of card, kind of similar to how you would have an item in play. They do have a willpower. They can be challenged. Body cards don't protect them. Cards that have Reckless, like Maui or Felicia, are required to challenge every turn, but they don't necessarily have to challenge a character. So it also adds this weird element to the gameplay where, maybe your opponent sets up an unfavorable trade for one of your Reckless characters. And they also have a location in play. You can now challenge that location and instead of taking the unfavorable trade. Some of them passively gain lore. Some of them, have different abilities if you have characters at the locations. There's also some cards that have really significant payoffs for playing locations. There's a green Peter Pan that anytime you move him to a location, if it's the first time in a given turn, he just gains lore to whatever the lore value is on them. I personally have been playing Red Steel Pirates. I think Jolly Roger's probably the one location that really kind of piqued my interest, that I wanted to try out locations. I wanted to see, how good are these things? I wanted the ability to, not have to play the Captain Hook on turn one. Instead, I maybe ink something past my opponent and they feel like they're okay to, turn their Lilo sideways and not play a bodyguard. And then on turn two, I can slam Jolly Roger, play my 1-drop Captain Hook, equip it to Jolly Roger, and then swing into the Lilo kind of unsurprised from hand. I think my favorite location out of all of the locations, it's probably a toss-up. It's probably a tie between, the Queen's Tower and RLS Legacy. I absolutely love RLS Legacy. It's got the highest willpower of any location in the game right now at 8. It passively gains you 2 lore at the start of every turn. It does have a steep move cost of 3, but if you have a character at the location, the move cost is reduced by 2, so it only costs 1, and it gives all characters at that location evasive. So I'm playing red, which means I'm probably playing Maui. Have you ever seen a Maui come flying through the air to take out a Surfer Mini? Because it's pretty cool.
I have not, but I'm looking forward to seeing it happen in the future. Thank you so much, RMB, for that rundown of how locations work and a little overview of some of the cards that we see that may have abilities based on locations that they're at. After looking at locations and the newest card type to enter Lorcana, let's take a look at some maybe example decks that people may play as we enter into set 3. RMB, you have a Sapphire Steel deck list for us to look at. Could you describe it to us?
Yeah, who would have thought RMB was going to play a Sapphire Steel deck? No, not this guy. But yeah, I mean, so I kind of took the shell from set 2 and said, what do we benefit from set 3? And what was our biggest problematic match? The biggest problematic match was red purple, and we often got into the super late stage of the game where we just needed a little additional reach. We needed some way to gain some uninteractive lore. And in comes Shift Grandma Tala. I'm sorry, Goat what? Grandma Tala is exactly what a ramp style deck wants to see. They, anytime I put a card into my Inkwell from anywhere, I gain a lore. You just get to ink once every turn, right? And we're also playing Fishbone Quill, right? Amazing card. So I kind of revitalized what I thought about blue steel, and we still have a lot of the same things. We still have our removal suite in Hades and Let It Go. It's now accompanied by Along Came Zeus, which I think is actually like the one card that I really kind of asked for out of set 2. Was, man, I really wish that I could just deal 5 with like a 4-cost song, and Along Came Zeus came right into my life. We still have, some of the staples: A Whole New World, Belle, Beast, Cogsworth, the Flaversham Popsicle package. Previously, I was playing Mickey Mouse Detective. Mickey Mouse Detective's still a great card, but because of Tala, we want some uninteractive ways to gain some additional lore. I've swapped out the Mickey Mouse Detectives for Winnie the Pooh. So Winnie the Pooh quests for 2. It's inkable, so we cut down on our uninked slots, and it can also be activated multiple times. This is kind of like a Fishbone Quill on a body. I tried Winnie the Pooh out in set 2, and a lot of the times he just didn't live to get the activation off, mostly due to Amber Steel just having Strength of a Raging Fire with a Cinderella on one. It was never living, but I'm willing to try it out again. We've also included One Jump Ahead. One of the things that the Popsicle deck that I think Jebas actually made really, really popular at the beginning of the set did this thing where it would go Popsicle on 1, One Jump Ahead on 2, and on turn 3 it could play Flaversham, which is just incredibly powerful to get your engine that early. And on turn 3, a 1/6 is very, very difficult to deal with. And it's also, getting that card filtration so that you can start to get to some of your ramp tools and get that Tala out. It's added a lot of reach to the deck. We still have bells that are still going to quest for 5 if they ever get the opportunity to quest. And I've had turns where I've been able to gain 5 to 6 lore off of Atala just from, you know, multiple bell inking activations, Fishbone Quill activations, Winnie the Pooh activations, singing 1 jump ahead. The deck just rounded out really, really well with Tala, and I think it gave us that last little bit of reach that we needed to close games out a little bit quicker.
Thank you so much, RMB, for giving us a quick deck tech into an example deck for set 3. It's always great to see what we can build upon and see where the possibilities go in the future. Jebas, do you have an example deck for us today in Amber Sapphire?
Absolutely. So I also saw the Grammatala and thought that it was one of the cooler things that you could be doing in the set to try and close out the game once you get to that point. So, you know, you are in Sapphire, you sort of look towards ramp, you got your Fishbone Quill. I opted for the Mickey Mouse and the 2-cost Grammatala for the shifting purposes as well. But the secondary color that I'm going with is Amber for a couple of reasons. One major one is bare necessities, because I think that it is just it's just the best card in the format, I would say. It allows you to interact with, you know, opposing combos, whether it's opponent world or if they're just trying to control your board with some sort of a you know, be prepared or grab your swords. And it really just, that disruption and that information makes your plays a lot stronger, right? We got the classic kind of popsicle, Flaversham, draw, Rapunzel. We have some Pongos in here because the deck is pretty character heavy and it's going to have a lot of ink available. So you're able to get access to more of your characters by just paying 2 every turn. So it gives you sort of an ink sink when you're kind of empty-handed a little bit, which is nice. We get the Stitch Surfers, also draw cards. The classic, you know, Blue Hades as a card that is a body plus a removal spell. And then I think one of the better cards in something like Dock is another sort of ramp spell alongside with Pluto. You know, you can go Pluto into Mickey or Pluto into Dock, and then that can get you up to something like a Cogsworth early or allow you to sort of double spell on the following turn, which I think is also nice. And then to cap it all off, we've got Chernobog, which can allow this sort of creature-heavy, character-heavy ramp deck recover from something like getting their whole board wiped or, you know, losing a lot of these earlier characters. To just put them back in the deck, you get to play this massive 9/9. All of a sudden, every Rapunzel that you draw is always going to be drawing you 3 cards because it's just so large of a character. Like a 9/9 is just absurd. We thought Stitch Surfer was a big butt. Well, now you got Stitch Surfer and you got Grammatala both at 4/8 on top of your 9/9 with Chernobog. So I really do think that a card like that, I'm not sure about all the numbers on all these cards. I haven't, you know, jammed 50 games on this or a version of this yet to see if this is exactly where it needs to be, but there's something here where you're playing a lot of these really impactful, you know, Pluto, Dock, Fishbone Quill are all some of the best, you know, ramp cards in the format that give a lot of velocity to your turns, especially if you're on the play, you know, going Pluto into Dock, and then all of a sudden, you know, you can popsicle a Flaversham in the same turn on like turn 3. That's problematic, right?
Well, Jebas, really looking forward to seeing this deck being played out and the possibilities that come with playing this powerful card in this type of deck. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. In Wonderland, today you've come and you've brought an update, really an advancement to a classic Emerald Steel discard deck. Can you walk us through that deck and kind of share with us the upgrades that it gets from set 3?
Yeah, I know a lot of people wanted me to talk about Steel Song, and I'll talk about that later a little bit. But this Emerald Steel, it gets a pretty big upgrade in a few ways. First, we already kind of mentioned Morph, and this is where it does its work, right? Like, the list before would run Hercules, like Baby Hercules and Baby Tinkerbell, and then if you play a Baby Hercules on 2, they know you have a Hercules in their hand, or can assume so, and can then try to play around it. If you play the baby tank on 3, your opponent's not going to play a bunch of 1 toughness characters that are just going to die to the Tinkerbell coming into play. They're not going to quest. They're going to play around your trick. But if you play Morph, you're going to present so many different things they have to play around that it's going to give them options and opportunities to make mistakes for you to take advantage of. Not only that, but just more fun too. Beast on 3 is good card draw to like maintain in some grindy matchups if you don't say have the Bucky to rip their hand away. And then we go to some of the other aspects we've added to the deck. Is the 3-drop Ursula is awesome, and it's a little magical Christmassy land, going like 3-drop Ursula and then into Lucifer, and then bippity boppity boop on the Ursula to blink the Lucifer 2 times, and you get the dream of hitting their whole hand to gone on turn 5, you know. And it's kind of neat and also kind of greedy, but when you get to play that just because the cards are good on their own is when it's pretty solid. Like, most of the characters in this deck have come into play abilities that matter, such as Tinkerbell and Lucifer, and to an extent 2-drop Ursula. Or you can use it to reset your sad beast, so you can start drawing cards after it after your opponent used the teeth or swords literally just to prevent you from drawing cards. Or to untap with Jafar after it's killed something and drawn you a card. It just actually has uses in the deck, instead of just only trying to get this crazy combo off. And Ursula, while yes, it's a key part to that, is very good with almost any song in the game, right? If you can sing it with Ursula, getting an extra copy is like pretty solid. Killing an extra character with Strength of the Raging Fire, and then Storm also like drawing 2 cards and dealing 4 damage is very good, especially when it's like an Electrolyze if you play Magic on crack. Like, it just like splits 2 ways. And then like making them discard 2 cards off of Singing and Chill is probably the weakest thing you could do off of it. But in general, like, I think it's a solid place to start. And then the third important upgrade to the deck is the other Ursula. Being able to take a Be Prepared so they can't kill your Bucky with swords, or, as I said, a Be Prepared, or reset their hand with a whole new world after you spend all of your resources making them discard it. She has really key components. You just have to make sure you're playing your Ursulas at the right time. It's not always great to play turn 2 Ursula unless you have a Bippity or something to reuse it later, because taking their 7-drop is not necessarily a good thing to do on turn 2. Just kind of a lesson that people had to learn when playing Magic. I mean, RMB, I'm sure, had to learn it, as he was saying Thoughtseize was his favorite card. You don't always play Thoughtseize on turn 1. I mean, some formats you do if it's crazy, but a lot of standard formats from Magic, you had to wait until the turn before they were going to cast the card that you need to get rid of. To be prepared, you need to hit it on turn 6 before they play it. If you hit it on turn 2, you don't know if they have it, right? Like, they had 4, 5 to 6 to 10 more cards they could have drawn based on Rabbits and Maleficents they've played, that you could be playing right into a top deck one that they drew the turn after you made them discard it.
Thank you so much, Wonderland, for sharing this deck with us and giving us an update to a deck that we had seen before, but now has some really key major players that get added to it. Well, another popular deck that has been talked about a lot online, has had an influence on some card spikes, is this Jafar wheel deck that has been going around. RMB, could you talk to us a little bit about this popular deck and one of the cards that's driving this deck to become popular?
Yeah, so towards when we got into set 2, there was a large group of people that were working on a blue fairy purple steel deck that had a really favorable matchup into red purple. Probably one of the craziest card reveals I think that happened throughout this spoiler season was the 7-drop Jafar. This card is absolutely crazy. If you think about the amount of shiftable Jafars that exist, you've got a 2-drop Jafar, you've got a 3-drop Jafar, you've got 3 different 4-drop Jafars. So you've got, the hand Jafar, you've got the 3/4 steel Jafar. There's even a 4-cost 2/5 that has like Challenger 3. You just have an embarrassment of riches in ways that you can shift this card. The new Jafar says that every time you draw a card while he's exerted, you gain a lore. So naturally, we have this card called A Whole New World in the game that says you draw 7 cards. If you use Jafar to sing A Whole New World, not only are you drawing 7 cards, but you're gaining 7 lore. Now, I don't know that this is necessarily the ideal build for it, but I think that wildly on the internet right now, this is probably the most talked about deck. It's probably the most consistent combo deck that's backed up by just a very powerful mid-range shell. You have things like Tinkerbell, grab your swords to have that, kind of board clear. You've got a little bit of removal in there. You've got, the card draw engines of purple and friends on the other side. There's just a ton of different shift lines in this deck too. Some of the play patterns that I've seen playing against this on ladder is they go, Robin Hood on turn 1, 2-drop Jafar on turn 2. On turn 3, they shift the big Robin Hood onto the little Robin Hood and sing a friends, or attack in favorably, gain 2 lore, and then on turn 4, they're usually playing either one of the locations, which is probably one of the best locations in the game, the tower. Yeah, card's absolutely crazy. Also an additional benefit for Jafar. They either play that or they play one of the other Jafars in case their 2-drop Jafar doesn't live. And then on turn 5, they're shifting the big Jafar, using the big Jafar to sing A Whole New World, drawing 7 cards, gaining 7 lore. If they draw into a second copy of A Whole New World, they can then use the Robin Hood that they shifted on turn 3 to sing, draw 7 more, gain 7 more. That's a turn 5 14 lore advantage, which is it's scary. Don't get me wrong, but this is all on paper. It looks like it would do this crazy thing very, very consistently, but in a vacuum, it's not taking into consideration any removal tools that your opponent might have. Maybe they're playing Strength of a Raging Fire, or they're playing Along Came Zeus, and you don't get the shift line and it doesn't work perfectly. I think that this deck concept, when the list gets flushed out, is going to become the new red-purple of the format. I think it's probably going to have the highest percentage played. I think it's going to be very, very consistent. I think it's constantly what people are going to be thinking, how do I beat that deck? When they're thinking of that deck, this is probably the deck that they're going to be thinking about.
Well, looking at set 3 and talking about some really strong cards that we've brought up, like Jafar and Grandma Tyla and Ursula, Wonderland, what would you say is the best card from set 3?
Bare Necessities. Like, it's just such an interactive role player. It might not win you a bunch of games, and so it's not going to be as flashy, but it's going to prevent you from losing a bunch of games sooner than you might not have. Like, it's going to answer the degenerate things, and it's like, this is the type of card that if you have this, you can stop the Jafar deck from gaining 7 lore and just like going to town. Might want to say, well, Jafar's the best card because it does all the things, or Tala because it gains all the lore. But like, I personally prefer the interaction card that prevents the other card from being too broken. It's good to have some proactive, reactive cards, if that makes sense.
And I believe that Jebas kind of echoed your same sentiment earlier when he talked about the Bare Necessities as well as RMB, but Jebas, what would you say is your top pick for the most powerful card from set 3?
Yeah, I mean, individual most powerful card, pretty clearly Bare Necessities, I would say, and I think all 3 of us are likely going to be in agreement on that. But if we ignore Bare Necessities to look at some of the other things that are incredibly powerful, I'm probably going to say something like Mr. Smee. I think the 2-drop Mr. Smee in Steel is secretly very powerful, and I don't know if it's necessarily the best card, but it would surprise me quite a bit if we don't see pretty well 4 of them in every Steel deck going forward. It's a 2-lore quester that's a 3/3. Like, that's better than Snake on its on its surface, just right out of the gate. And the deal 1 damage, if it ever gets resist, doesn't do anything. If you have Rapunzel, sometimes that's an upside. It just is incredibly high statted for what that card's downside is.
We'll have to see if Mr. Smee can get in some more games, especially with that 2 lore, like you were saying, able to quest. Really strong card and such a low ink cost to cast it. RMB, what would you say is your top pick for the strongest card in the set 3?
You know, I'm gonna have to go against the grain here and say that the Bare Necessities is the best card in set 3. For all the aforementioned reasons. I'll take it a step further. I'll give you my top pick for each individual color. I think Bare Necessities is number 1 in Amber. I do think that Jafar is likely number 1 in Amethyst. Emerald is really difficult for me to choose because there's so many good cards, but I think it's likely Morph. I think Morph enables just so many cards. I mean, the amount of color pairings that you can have with green now is going to be because of Morph. Just having the ability to shift anything onto it. I think it's such an incredibly powerful card. Obviously, both of the Ursulas are really, really good. I think for Ruby, it's probably Jim Hawkins, the 5-drop Jim Hawkins. I think that game designers need to be very, very careful when it comes to free. This card has the word free on it twice. You get to cast a location from your hand for free. Anytime a location comes into play, you can move Jim Hawking to it for free. It's got so much going for it, and if locations become a staple in this game, Jim Hawkins is a scary card for future sets as we start to get more locations. For blue, Sapphire, I feel like kind of caught the short end of the stick with this set. I think that there's really only 2 cards that I'm really excited about, and I can't tell you which one I like more, but it's between Grammatala and Lucky Dime. Grammatala is probably a little bit ahead of Lucky Dime just because it is inkable and uninteractive lore gain. You know, both of the cards have that, and I think that that's very, very powerful. For Steel, there's 1 card and 1 card only that I think just absolutely outshines every other card in Steel, and that's John Silver. I've been playing the Red Steel Pirate deck, and John Silver is such an absurd card. The fact that he gets resist 1 and +1 lore for each location that you have in play, like, not only does he protect himself, but he's also like your finishing quester. I've won games on turn 5 where, you know, my John Silvers are questing for like 5 or 6 apiece. It does not feel like a fair card in any way, shape, or form, and just leaves you with no ways to interact with it, considering most of the removal in the format is damage based.
Well, thank you so much. Looking kind of at the overall set, what's your impression, Wonderland, of competitive Lorcana in the future?
I have high hopes for it. With the pro system starting up, the OP system, I'm very excited for that. Can't wait to learn more information and see where we're going for it. A lot of people were kind of doomsaying with set 2's red purple, but I just think a lot of people just didn't put enough effort into trying to fight it completely. It did dominate, and don't get me wrong, it had some issues, but I think they're learning from it, and it is just the second set. If you played Magic, honestly, like most block formats, you get 1 or 2 deck archetypes, right? And Lorcana has been playing with less cards than that. Like, I've played block that there was only 1 viable option if you wanted to win the event, and I feel that's not necessarily the same as Lorcana. And with the new cards, I think it's going to open up even more.
Lorcana, at its outset here, just a block format, right? We have such a small card pool that it is not surprising to anybody who has played other really small card pool formats that it's ended up very rock, paper, scissory. You only have so many cards that are a step above the other ones, maybe in cost, maybe they are some of the few that give card advantage. Like set 1 really only had a couple of cards that drew you additional resources, and all of them were awesome and huge role players in the decks that they were in. and that'll continue to be true. The same with, you know, in this case, A Whole New World or Grab Your Sword or Be Prepared. They are irreplaceable role players of those particular colors and in those decks. So then you're going to see them pop up a lot more. The reason I think that we see so many steel decks is because some of the best answer to cards in the whole format and in the whole game currently is just deal 2 damage to the opposing board from Grab Your Sword, which other colors just don't necessarily have access to that same level of early, even singable interaction. So I hope that going forward with Lorcana, they do start to broaden that out a little bit so that the game doesn't revolve just around steel being able to deal with exerted characters, or sorry, non-exerted characters. Because currently, obviously, Rush and things like that can do well against characters that have just come into play. But as far as the competitive, I think that there have been enough decks, even with such a small card pool, that I am very hopeful for the future. And I think it's only going to keep getting better. And I look forward to the announcement, supposedly sometime in March, which is really not that far away, for what they're going to do for their organized play. And then we'll really be able to dive in from there.
Well, thank you so much, Jebas. I'm also looking forward to it and hope to see all of y'all honestly playing at that competitive level and seeing where we can go with these decks and how we strategize. Wonder, is there any final thoughts you have that you'd like to share with the community, and where can we watch you again as you stream and build decks in the future?
Well, I try to stream Monday through Friday from 10 to 2 Central Time, as long as my kid's at school. I've had to recently not stream as often from holidays and sicknesses. Who knows what the summer will hold. But overall, I'd like to thank the great community. I've ran into a few of you at a local event recently from the Discord and other things, and that's been pretty cool. And just want to motivate everyone to go out and build some decks and play some Lorcana. Prove yourself, have some fun.
Thank you so much, Wonderland, for joining us for the interview. Really appreciate you. Jebas, where can we catch you in the future, and where can people watch you, follow your deck building, and what you're doing? Yeah,
so you can catch me sometimes when I'm streaming on Twitch live, just at twitch.tv/Jebas. Otherwise, if you are not able to catch me, because I know my stream hours are a little erratic, I do upload all of my VODs to YouTube as well, just youtube.com/JebasSBB. And you can find me there, and then check out the VODs, and then Twitter at the same, at JebasSBB, where I will generally post deck lists and let you know when I actually do go live.
Thank you so much, Jebas. We'll make sure to have all of your links in the description, and y'all can check him out over there. And RMB, where can people watch you in the future if they'd like to see some of your matches and some of your grinding that you're doing to try to get to Worlds?
So I do stream on Twitch as well, twitch.tv/r__m__b. I'll also be starting a YouTube channel pretty soon. The YouTube channel is going to consist of, VODs of games from Pixelborn. It's also going to include IRL events. I do have a streaming setup now that I can take on the go with me to record games when I am at live paper events and then upload it. So lots of stuff coming for 2024, and as we get closer to OP play, I'm just going to be looking to try and produce as much quality content as possible for anyone that wants to learn about Lorcana or wants to try and grind and get to Worlds. You're gonna have to fight me for it, but I'll give you guys all the tools that you need necessary to try to be the best player you can be.
Well, thank you so much, RMB. We really appreciate that and look forward to watching your videos in the future.